Imagine, if you will, just the concept of a peace treaty.
Right.
Normally, when you think about the end of this massive, bloody conflict, your mind probably goes straight to a physical document.
Yeah, totally. Like a piece of parchment.
Exactly. You picture, like, diplomats gathered around this heavy mahogany table in a stuffy room, a bunch of signatures on paper, maybe a wax seal.
Right. It's an agreement that exists outside of the people who drafted it.
Yeah.
It's entirely external. I mean, a piece of paper can be debated, it can be amended, or, just shoved into some national archive and forgotten about.
Right, or torn to shreds when the political winds shift.
Exactly.
But I want you to imagine a completely different scenario here. Think about what it would actually feel like if that peace treaty wasn't a piece of paper. What if it was a living, breathing person?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Imagine being the literal genetic embodiment of a really fragile compromise between two deeply entrenched societies.
And we're not talking about, like, a polite border dispute here.
No, not at all. We are talking about two cultures that have absolutely slaughtered each other for 2,000 years.
2 millennia of violence leaves just a staggering psychological footprint.
Yeah, I mean, how could it not?
Right. The sheer volume of intergenerational trauma, the inherited prejudices, the rivers of bad blood, none of that just vanishes because the armies put down their weapons.
It really doesn't. And that is the staggering reality we are unpacking today. Welcome to our deep dive into the source material you provided.
We're looking at a true masterclass in political tension today.
Absolutely. Sociological world building, psychological isolation, all drawn from Wolfcry, which is volume 4 of Amelia Atwater-Rhodes' The Key Show series.
It's such a rich text.
It really is. Our mission today is to thoroughly dissect the dynamics of this land called Wyvern's Court, which is currently teetering on the absolute razor edge of civil war.
But to really understand the stakes, you have to understand the layout.
Right. Let's set the scene for the listener, because the geographical and cultural contrast is just jarring right from the jump.
The physical geography of Wyvern's Court is, it's a perfect manifestation of its divided society. You have these two vastly different topographical zones that directly mirror the two species trying to coexist there.
So in the north, you have the hills of the avians. These are the bird people.
Right.
And when our story opens, they are in the middle of this massive celebration called Festival. It's an anniversary event.
And the atmosphere is very specific, right?
Yeah, it's bright, it's cheerful, but it's highly structured. You have storytellers holding court, tiny silver bells ringing in the crisp air. They're celebrating 21 years of unbroken peace.
21 years since their leader, the Golden Hawk Danica, and the leader of the South, the Royal Cobriana, enacted this totally desperate plan to end the war.
Right, but then if you walk just a short distance into the southern hills, the atmosphere undergoes a violent shift.
It's like night and day.
Literally. You leave the crisp, structured air of the north and enter the territory of the serpiente, the snake people.
And they are throwing a completely different kind of party.
Oh, totally. The air is thick, the music is heavy, rhythmic, and the physical intensity is just off the charts.
They are preparing to celebrate the initiation of a royal cobra, right?
Yeah, a dancer named Salem. He's being initiated into the Dancers Guild. And the text points out what a massive deal this is, because Salem is the first royal cobra to join this venerated group in 800 years.
So you have these two completely disparate celebrations. They're separated by nothing but a shared valley.
But practically existing in different dimensions.
Exactly, and caught directly in the center of this geographic, cultural, and psychological valley is our protagonist.
Oliza Shardae Cobriana.
She is the heir to both thrones. She is the living peace treaty we mentioned.
And through her, we're really going to explore the crushing, impossible burden of leadership. We're looking at a young woman trying to navigate ingrained cultural prejudice, sudden geopolitical crises,
and the terrifying reality-bending wild cards of ancient magic.
Yes, because you really can't talk about the politics of Wyvern's Court without talking about Oliza's actual physical body.
Right. Her biology is the political reality of this entire world.
It really is. Like, when we think of biracial or multicultural identities in our world, it's usually a matter of heritage, cultural practices, dual citizenship.
Yeah.
But for Oliza, her heritage dictates her anatomical reality. She's a shapeshifter. And the text specifically outlines that she has 5 distinct forms.
The biological mechanics of her existence are just fascinating. I mean, she has her human form, naturally.
Right.
Then, inherited from her mother's side, the avian queen Danica, she can shift into a pure golden hawk.
Okay, and then from her father.
Inherited from her father's side, the serpiente king Zane, she can take the form of a massive black cobra.
Now, if it stopped there, it would be a relatively clean binary,
Yeah,
right?
she could just code switch physically.
Exactly. She could be the hawk when she needs to deal with the avians, and she could be the cobra when she needs to commune with the serpiente.
But her genetics do not allow for a clean separation.
No, they don't. And this brings us to her syntheses.
The text introduces the concept of the wyvern form.
Right.
This is described as a majestic, almost mythological blend. It features the powerful, elongated body of a cobra, but the hood is brilliantly ruffled with feathers.
And wings, right.
Yeah, she possesses a massive set of wings that can drive her through the air with far more speed and power than a standard hawk.
The wyvern form is literally what the court is named after.
Exactly. It is the idealized vision of the peace treaty. In fact, there is a pristine white marble statue of a wyvern in the absolute center of the plaza.
Serving as this aspirational symbol of their unified society.
The operative word there being aspirational.
Yeah, because that statue isn't the whole truth, is it?
Not at all. There is a fifth form, and this form is where the political facade completely crumbles.
Right. Eliza has a half form that she actively, viscerally views as a monster.
The visual description in the text is incredibly striking. She manifests sunset-colored wings, jagged black scales, terrifying garnet eyes.
It's like a nightmare version of both.
Yeah, with the piercing vision of a hawk and the lethal venom of a cobra.
The psychological dissonance between these two synthetic flames is so profound.
It really is. The idealized wyvern form is what the public wants the piece to look like.
Smooth, majestic, heroic.
Right. It is palatable to the masses. But the half form, the monster, is the harsh, unvarnished reflection of what blending these two diametrically opposed cultures actually feels like on the inside.
It's chaotic. It's intimidating. It doesn't fit neatly into an aesthetic or political box.
No, it doesn't.
It actually reminds me of being the only child of a spectacularly messy public divorce.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right, where the parents eventually reconciled, but the extended families on both sides still harbor a bitter, multi-generational blood feud.
Yeah, the tension is still there.
Exactly. Imagine you are that child.
Uh.
Every single time you walk into a room, all the aunts, uncles, and cousins are scrutinizing your every micro-expression to see whose side you're really on.
They're just waiting for you to mess up.
If you laugh too loud, one side judges you. If you sit too quietly, the other side judges you. And if you show traits of both families at the exact same time, it's not seen as a beautiful synthesis.
Right. It's seen as an abomination.
Exactly.
And building on that analogy, the parents in this scenario, Danica and Zane, they executed what the text explicitly refers to as a mad plan.
A mad plan. Yeah.
They forced this reconciliation, they stopped the clash of armies, they ended the mass casualties, and they stopped the endless production of widows and orphans.
Which is great, obviously.
Of course. But, as Eliza astutely notes in the text, hatred takes significantly longer to die than killing.
That is such a powerful line. Hatred takes longer to die than killing.
Her parents are perhaps blinded by the relief of simply not being at war anymore.
Right. Their baseline for success is just the absence of bloodshed.
But Eliza was born into the peace. She doesn't have the memory of war to make the current tension feel like a relief. She is hyper-aware of the fragility of the world they built.
And she articulates this internal crisis right at the beginning of the material. She asks this heartbreaking, impossible question. She says, "To which group do I belong? Both or neither?"
Because on a societal level, they worship her as a symbol.
They literally built a marble monument to her potential in the town square.
Right. But on an individual human level, she is profoundly isolated.
Yeah, when the avians look at her, they can't help but see the lethal cobra venom.
And when the serpiente look at her, they can't help but see the sharp, predatory hawk feathers.
She is experiencing the ultimate alienation of the figurehead.
She is an institution before she is allowed to be a person.
Exactly. Her mere physical existence is a political statement that inherently offends purists on both sides of the aisle.
And the physical monster form she assumes later in the narrative, it's the outward manifestation of her internal alienation.
She cannot just exist. She must constantly perform a balancing act that requires her to suppress fundamental parts of her own nature.
But, you know, Eliza's internal biological crisis doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No, the moment she steps out of her room, her biology becomes a political liability. The external world of Wyvern's court is just a powder keg.
We really have to look at the daily realities of this culture clash because The idea of asking these two distinct societies to just magically get along is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, they don't just have different preferences, they have opposing nervous systems.
The clash is architectural, it's biological, and it's deeply sociological.
It's a profound misalignment of core values and social norms. Let's analyze the avians first.
Okay, the text paints them as highly reserved, strictly hierarchical, and intensely controlled.
And one of the most critical details is their view on physical contact. To an avian, unsolicited physical touch is not just annoying.
No, it is completely vulgar. It is a violation of boundaries.
And you can see how that mindset permeates their culture right down to the stories they tell their children. Like, at the festival, Oliza is recounting a myth to the young avians about a figure named Alasdair.
Right. Alistair was a legendary golden hawk who supposedly saved starving tribes of humans.
Yeah, the story goes that these tribes were violently squabbling over scarce food during a terrible famine. And Alasdair brought them together, gifted them with avian forms, and taught them the discipline of hunting.
It's a foundational myth about imposing order onto chaos, about discipline saving you from base animalistic violence.
The myth serves as a fascinating sociological mirror, but the text reveals a hidden, darker layer to this story.
Yes. Eliza notes that just 20 years prior, before the peace treaty was signed, the myth of Alasdair always concluded with a brutal, tragic ending.
Right, where Alasdair was murdered by the serpiente.
Exactly. For generations, tales like these fueled the avians' hatred from the literal cradle.
Even if the current post-treaty generation is actively editing the murder out of the bedtime story, the parents listening on the periphery still remember the original ending.
The intergenerational trauma and the fear of the serpiente are baked into the very foundation of their cultural identity.
So contrast that tight, fear-based structure with the serpiente in the southern hills.
They operate on an entirely different frequency.
They really do. They are passionate, emotion-driven, and intensely touch-oriented. For them, movement, specifically this complex form of dance called harja, isn't just entertainment.
It is central to their entire civilization.
It's how they communicate, it's how they court one another, and crucially, it's how they maintain their historical records.
The material highlights a specific dance called the Namirda.
Right.
This dance recounts the historical seduction of a powerful, dangerous creature named Leben by a brave serpiente leader named Maeve.
So for the serpiente, history isn't something you just read in a dusty book. It is something you feel and embody through physical movement.
Consequently, their daily social interactions are incredibly tactile. A touch, a caress, moving into someone's personal space, these are their primary languages of affection and connection.
Which brings us directly to the inciting incident that lights the fuse on this cultural powder keg.
Yeah, this is where it gets messy.
Eliza is attending the avian festival in the northern hills. Accompanying her is Urban, a serpiente dancer.
And Urban isn't just a random citizen. He is her childhood friend, her nestmate, and widely known to be her foremost suitor among the serpiente.
And he is blatantly, dangerously out of place in the north. The text gives us this visceral image of avian mothers literally scooping up their children to physically remove them from his proximity.
The tension in that scene is suffocating. I mean, Urban is attempting to be polite by avian standards, but his baseline physical presence is viewed as a threat.
Yeah. Eventually, he just has to leave the northern hills to return south for his friend Salem's initiation ceremony. But as he takes his leave, he casually loops an arm around Eliza's waist and kisses her on the cheek.
Now, to Urban and to any serpiente watching, this is an entirely platonic, friendly gesture.
It's the cultural equivalent of a high five or waving goodbye.
But he doesn't do it in the southern hills.
No, he does it in the northern hills, surrounded by avians.
And the avian reaction is instantaneous and hostile.
Manus, a young avian nobleman who is also actively courting Eliza, physically grabs Urban's arm to drag him away from her.
Through the lens of avian culture, Urban's casual public kiss is shockingly forward.
It's perceived as an assault on Eliza's dignity and a public disrespect to the avian court.
But Urban, true to his serpientan nature, refuses to be intimidated.
Right. He mocks Marus, blows Eliza a deeply theatrical kiss just to twist the knife, and saunters off.
Typical Urban.
Yeah. But the fallout from this seemingly minor interaction triggers a massive realization for Eliza. After Urban leaves, Marus apologizes to Eliza for losing his temper, but he points out a bitter truth.
What did he say?
He tells her the laws might be the same on both sides, but they change according to blood.
Wow. Marus hits on a profound political inequity there.
He really does. He correctly observes that Urban actively took advantage of Eliza's dual nature.
Urban knew that Oliza, possessing cobra blood, would allow a serpent to behave in a highly physical way, a way she would instantly shut down if an avian tried it.
Exactly. Urban knew his actions would deeply offend the avians watching, and he weaponized Eliza's tolerance to assert his dominance.
This interaction completely floors Oliza because she realizes Marus is absolutely right.
Yeah, she has been operating under the illusion that you can just ask people to observe local customs, but she realizes the utter failure of that approach.
She thinks to herself, and this is a common thesis of the entire text, but between a culture in which it was inappropriate to display strong emotion and another in which it was rude not to. One world where touching was vulgar and another where lack of contact was an insult, there was no easy middle ground.
She articulates the paradox of forced assimilation perfectly.
There is no mathematical compromise between do not touch me under any circumstances and if you do not touch me, you are openly disrespecting me.
Any action a person takes in that environment inherently violates the deepest moral codes of one of the groups. You literally cannot split the difference between those two realities.
No, you can't.
But I want to pause here, because as much as I sympathize with Eliza's impossible situation, her handling of this specific conflict reveals a pretty glaring double standard. I think she acts like a massive hypocrite in the immediate aftermath of this kiss.
Oh, really? Let's dissect her reaction. Where do you see the hypocrisy?
Okay, so Eliza turns around and fiercely scolds Marus. She tells him in no uncertain terms that she is not a delicate, unapproachable avian lady, nor is she a wild serpiente dancer.
Right.
She tells him that if he actually wants to be your king one day, he needs to accept both sides of her heritage.
Which sounds fair on the surface.
On the surface, sure. She then demands that Marus prove he can handle his serpiente side by inviting him to attend the serpiente reception down the south. But look at the mechanics of what she's demanding.
Go on.
Isn't she forcing Marus to completely abandon his own deeply ingrained cultural boundaries while simultaneously giving Urban a free pass to waltz into the north and violate avian norms without consequence?
That is a highly critical and, I'd say, accurate reading of the power dynamics at play.
It just feels so unbalanced.
It exposes the inherent unfairness of the melting pot ideal when the constituent cultures fundamentally resist melting. Eliza expects Marus, the representative of the strict culture, to expand his tolerance and step wildly outside his comfort zone to accommodate the expressive culture.
Yes.
However, she does not demand an equal level of restraint from Urban when he is in avian territory. Urban is permitted to be fully, unapologetically serpiente in the north, but Marus is demanded to suppress his avian instincts in the south.
Exactly. It's as if she's penalizing the reserved culture for being reserved and rewarding the expressive culture for being expressive, all under the guise of teaching them acceptance. She's demanding that the avians do all the emotional heavy lifting to bridge the gap.
And the immediate consequences of this forced exposure are disastrous.
Total train wreck.
Marus, eager to prove himself worthy of the crown, actually agrees to attend the southern reception. This is a monumental step for an avian. But the moment they arrive in the southern hills, the sensory overload begins. They are immediately confronted with a serpiente named Rosalind performing a highly complex, deeply sensual dance.
Marus is visibly overwhelmed. The text notes he goes pale, then flushes crimson.
Yeah.
He is entirely out of his depth.
And Urban, rather than welcoming him, immediately seizes the opportunity to antagonize him.
Yeah, whispering provocative comments to Eliza about what Marus must be thinking.
Urban is actively trying to humiliate him.
And Eliza's brilliant solution to diffuse this tension. She decides, in the middle of this crowded, passionate serpiente party, to teach Marus how to dance.
Oh, no.
She literally pulls this terrified, physically rigid avian boy onto the serpiente dance floor. It's an absolute recipe for a social disaster.
It demonstrates a massive blind spot in her leadership. She is attempting to force a complex cultural synthesis on an individual interpersonal level that hasn't even been achieved on a broad societal level after 21 years.
She's utilizing her suitors as unwilling lab rats for her grand political experiment.
She really is.
So we have this internal cultural tension perfectly established. The rubber band of Wyvern's court is pulled as tight as it can possibly go.
And just as the local drama is peaking, the narrative drops a massive external anvil on the situation that forces the whole thing to snap.
Right. We move from micropolitics to macro geopolitics. Suddenly, the entire atmosphere of the plaza shifts.
Mm.
A shadow falls over the area.
It's Nicias, right?
Yeah, Nicias. He's the second in command of Oliza's royal guard. He's a fascinating character we'll talk more about later, but he arrives bringing deeply unsettling news.
A pride of heavily armed lion mercenaries has just arrived in Wyvern's court.
The sudden injection of outside military force into this delicate ecosystem is a brilliant narrative pivot.
We move instantly from teenage cultural squabbles to high-stakes, life-or-death international diplomacy. The mercenaries are led by a lion named Tavassan.
And he delivers a highly calibrated, very suspicious message to the royal family.
He states that Kalisa, the powerful alpha of the allied Vahamil wolf pack, has been severely injured in a hunting accident.
Let's put massive neon air quotes around the phrase hunting accident.
The political rhetoric is incredibly deliberate here. Tavassan is a professional. He prefaces his news with phrases like, "I was told," and "Kalisa says."
Right. He is strictly refusing to independently verify the truth of the statement.
He is insulating his mercenary company from the politics of the situation by acting merely as a biological recording device.
But Oliza is sharp. She doesn't just accept the surface-level message. She looks at the messenger. She asks Tavassan the million-dollar question. Why does it take 6 heavily armed feline soldiers to deliver a simple message about a hunting accident?
And Tavassan's carefully constructed non-answer reveals the terrifying truth of the situation.
Oh, what does he say?
He replies by noting the usual parameters of his employment. He states that normally his pride is hired to carry messages across exceedingly difficult or hostile terrain, which is definitively not the case for a trip from the Wolflands to Wyvern's court.
Okay, so that's option A. What's option B?
Alternatively, he notes, they are hired when a leader does not want to place an important missive in the hands of someone whose loyalty might be questionable.
Oof. So let's decode the geopolitical subtext here, because this is where the survival of the entire alliance comes into play.
Hey.
What is actually happening in the Wolflands?
The subtext is a blaring 5-alarm fire.
Yeah.
The Vahamil wolves are in the midst of a violent succession crisis. Kalisa hasn't tripped and fallen during a hunt. She has almost certainly been attacked, and likely by members of her own pack.
The fact that she had to hire outside feline mercenaries means the rot is deep.
Exactly. She cannot trust her own lieutenants to safely deliver a cry for help. She is calling for Zane and Danica, her most powerful military allies, to come to her territory immediately.
Under the polite diplomatic guise of introducing them to a potential heir, right?
Right, but practically speaking, she doesn't want to show off a new baby. She needs the king and queen of Wyvern's court to show up with their terrifying magical and military reputations and flex their muscle to protect her throne from an imminent coup.
That is the grim reality of wolf law as established in this universe. The Vahamil pack has flourished under Kalisa's leadership, but their societal structure dictates that any wolf can physically challenge a leader who appears weak.
An injured alpha is effectively a dead alpha unless she has massive, undeniable outside backing to deter challengers until she heals.
Which means Zane and Danica, Eliza's parents, have absolutely no choice. They have to leave Wyvern's court immediately.
The geopolitical alliance with the wolves is far too critical to allow Kalisa to fall.
But look at the devastating ripple effect of this necessity. Because the king and queen must ride out to secure the foreign alliance, Oliza is left entirely alone to manage the domestic crisis of Wyvern's court.
The ultimate safety net is yanked out from under her at the exact moment the cultural tensions between her suitors are reaching a boiling point.
It creates a classic suffocating narrative crucible.
The visual juxtaposition Atwater-Rhodes provides here is striking. You have these 6 lethal, heavily armed lions standing stoically in the peaceful, intellectual sanctuary of the rookery courtyard.
Meanwhile, just over the crest of the hills, the serpiente are completely oblivious to the looming threat of regional war.
Continuing their wild, passionate dance celebrations.
The contrast between impending international bloodshed and blissful domestic ignorance is incredibly stark. And Liza is the only person standing in the middle, fully comprehending both realities, holding the entire fragile system together.
And the second she steps away from the lions and goes back to the southern hills to check on her people, the domestic powder keg finally explodes.
With the stabilizing authority of the king and queen gone, the cultural tension we explored earlier completely devolves from awkward, passive-aggressive dancing into actual physical violence.
The escalation is brutally fast and entirely predictable.
Yeah. While Oliza was preoccupied with the mercenary crisis, Urban and Marus were left alone on the dance floor. The premise was that Urban was supposedly continuing Marus's dance lesson.
But in reality, it was an exercise in intense mutual antagonism.
Urban relentlessly baits Marus. He pushes him past his breaking point. He sneers at him and says, "I forgot, you're a bird. You would recognize it come on if it bit you."
And Marus, the rigidly controlled avian who has been pushed entirely out of his cultural comfort zone, finally snaps. He throws a punch.
The mechanics of the escalation are crucial here. Marus, the avian, initiates the physical violence.
But in serpiente culture, a physical strike demands an immediate reciprocal physical response. It is a matter of honor.
Right, so Urban immediately retaliates, utilizing his superior physical strength to send Marus crashing to the ground.
And in a fraction of a second, it transforms from two jealous teenagers fighting over a girl into a massive tribalistic clash.
It's the avians versus the serpiente. Salem, the newly initiated royal cobra, leaps in and grabs Marus.
Prentice, an avian Alistair, which is essentially a betrothed nobleman with high status, immediately steps in to physically defend Marus.
The entire population of the Southern Hills stops dancing and rallies behind Salem. It's a full-scale riot waiting to happen.
It is the terrifying reality of tribalism triggered by a perceived microaggression. The underlying animosity is so thick that it only takes a single spark to ignite a wildfire.
Oliza manages to stop the brawl before it turns into a massacre. But the method she is forced to use is incredibly telling.
She doesn't use diplomacy.
No, she doesn't use her voice as a princess. She has to use her wyvern shriek.
The text describes this sound as something sharper and more piercing than a hawk's cry, and infinitely more dangerous than a cobra's hiss.
She has to literally embody the terrifying, dominant, monstrous aspect of her biology to shock the crowd into submission through sheer fear.
She screams them into silence, she fiercely scolds the ringleaders, and the crowd slowly disperses.
Urban brushes himself off and claims he's going to bed. Marus, humiliated, flies home to the safety of the Northern Hills. Order is temporarily restored.
But the foundational damage is done. The illusion of unity is shattered.
And unfortunately, the night gets so much worse.
This is where the grim political reality crashes headlong into the personal trauma of our protagonist.
Later that night, unable to sleep, Oliza goes for a walk in the rain to clear her head. She inadvertently wanders into the Northern Hills, the territory of the avians.
And there, on the cold stone, she finds something that simply should not exist in Wyvern's court.
She finds a figure lying motionless on the hard cobblestones. It's Urban.
And he has been brutally, systematically beaten. He is curled tightly in a protective ball, bleeding heavily, with a shattered leg and a violently dislocated knee.
The physiological implications for Urban are devastating. I mean, he is a professional serpiente dancer.
His body is his livelihood, his cultural identity, and his primary method of communication.
A severely broken leg is a tragedy that could permanently end his career and alter his standing in society.
It's absolutely sickening. Oliza discovers his broken body in the dark and screams for help.
Her guards arrive. Nices uses some emergency onmic magic to temporarily stabilize the trauma, and they manage to summon an avian doctor.
But when the immediate medical panic subsides, and Oliza finally gets a moment to speak to Urban privately, the massive political reality of the attack sets in.
She asks him the terrifying question: who did it?
And Urban confirms her absolute worst fear: avians.
He explains that he was walking alone through the north. Because he's a cold-blooded serpent, he could vividly feel the intense, warm-blooded body heat of several avians tracking him in the dark.
They ambushed him, overpowering him through sheer numbers.
And the chilling detail is the only thing he heard them say during the beating.
Stay away from her.
Stay away from her. This completely changes the nature of the crime.
This isn't just a random mugging or a drunken brawl that got out of hand.
This is a targeted, politically motivated hate crime.
It is a violent ideological enforcement of cultural boundaries. A group of avians saw a serpent encroaching on their princess, attempting to blur the lines between their species, and they utilized brutal, coordinated violence to physically put him back in what they perceived to be his proper place.
If we look at this through a historical lens, this is exactly like a localized Archduke Franz Ferdinand moment.
Oh, absolutely. One brutal back alley beating has the absolute potential to trigger the immediate collapse of a 21-year international peace treaty.
Think about the catastrophic fallout if this information goes public. If the serpiente nest discovers that a coordinated group of avians ambushed their beloved little brother, they are not going to file a polite diplomatic grievance.
They're going to riot.
They will march straight into the Northern Hills and start killing. And the 2,000-year war will resume before the sun comes up.
Oliza is entirely trapped in an agonizing, seemingly unwinnable dilemma. On one hand, she absolutely must delay telling the serpiente the truth about the attack to prevent immediate vigilante justice and mass casualties.
But on the other hand, actively hiding the truth from her own people risks permanently destroying the royal family's newly rebuilt trust with the Dancers Guild.
Remember, earlier that exact same evening, they were celebrating Salem's initiation as a symbol of unity.
Right. If the dancers eventually discover that Oliza lied to them in order to protect avian criminals, they will view it as an unforgivable betrayal of her cobra blood.
She will lose her people forever.
She is utterly paralyzed by the weight of the crown. She has no tangible proof, no specific suspects other than perhaps Marus or Prentice, and crucially, no parents around to bail her out with their authority.
So, under the crushing pressure of this unsolvable crisis, what does she do?
Overwhelmed by the threat of imminent civil war and her own debilitating guilt over urban suffering, she desperately seeks a mental escape.
And this desire to escape leads her directly into the most dangerous, unpredictable, and mind-bending element of this entire universe.
Magic. Specifically, the ancient, volatile, and deeply uncontrollable magic wielded by the Falcons of the island of Anmik.
We absolutely need to dive deep into the Falcons because their inclusion elevates the stakes from mere political intrigue to existential dread.
We've briefly mentioned Nescius, Oliza's avian guard, with the distinctive silver-blue hair. He spent considerable time on the isolated Falcon island of Anmik.
And he returned bearing horrific torture scars. He studies their magic, but he actively minimizes his skill, terrified of what the power can do.
And serving as the ultimate cautionary tale for this power is the character of Heir.
Heir is Oliza's cousin. She possesses the stark black hair and piercing garnet eyes of the royal cobra line, but her mother was a falcon.
And the biological and magical synthesis of those two wildly divergent heritages has nearly shattered her sanity.
Nearly shattered feels like an understatement. The text notes that when Heir first arrived at Wyvern's court, she was entirely comatose, her mind broken.
Now she wanders the halls, prone to terrifying periods of complete incoherence and detachment from reality.
And in the immediate aftermath of discovering Urban's broken body, while Oliza is hiding in the royal library trying to process the trauma, Heir materializes out of the shadows.
Heir's presence in the library is incredibly unsettling. She delivers a chilling, cryptic warning to Oliza. She simply says, "Don't do it."
When a frantic Oliza demands to know what exactly she shouldn't do, Heir candidly admits she doesn't know.
Which has to be the most frustrating thing a prophet can say to a leader who is already at her absolute breaking point. Don't do the thing, but I can't tell you what the thing is.
It is maddening, but Heir goes on to explain why she lacks the specifics, and this explanation provides a profound, terrifying insight into the mechanics of Falcon magic.
She introduces Oliza to the concept of the Sakri.
Right. Let's draw a sharp contrast between the Sakri and the Harja we discussed earlier. The Harja are the cultural, passionate dances of the serpiente. They are forms of physical communication and artistic expression.
But Sakri are fundamentally different. They are ancient, complex, magical dances. They are the physical remnants of rituals designed to manipulate reality, used to summon rain from the sky, conjure elaborate illusions, or communicate with spirits.
The crucial distinction is that over the centuries, the serpiente have largely lost the active magic behind these movements, performing them mostly by rote tradition. But the falcons never lost their connection to the power.
Heir reveals that she claims to wield a falcon's ancient power, specifically focusing on a dance known as the Sakriashi. This is a highly complex, mentally taxing visualization used to actively petition the future for guidance.
But the psychological cost of wielding this magic is absolutely horrifying. Heir vividly explains how her mind is constantly fractured by the burden.
She tells Oliza, "A single soul is not meant to know every is and was and may be and could have been."
When Heir taps into the magic, she doesn't just see one linear path. She sees all possible overlapping timelines simultaneously. She perceives the consequences of every potential action before the choices are even made.
Her brain literally lacks the capacity to process the vast, non-linear nature of time that the magic violently forces upon her consciousness.
It creates a true epistemological nightmare. The magic actively destroys the human, or in this specific case, the avian serpient mind's fundamental ability to perceive reality chronologically. It weaponizes the brain's desire for cause and effect, overwhelming the user with a paralyzing sea of infinite variables.
And this brings us to one of the most wild and frustrating sequences of events in the story. Oliza, who explicitly states multiple times that she does not believe in prophecy or magic, decides to attempt to visualize the steps of the Sacriashi in her mind.
She isn't trying to cast a spell, she is using it strictly as a mental exercise. Serpiente dancers often use these highly complex visualizations to calm their breathing and focus their minds.
She calculates that focusing on the intricate, demanding ripples of the ancient dance will force her panicked brain to stop obsessing over Urban's broken body and the impending collapse of her kingdom.
It is a tragically desperate coping mechanism. She thinks to herself, you're thinking too much, you aren't comfortable with it yet. She is merely seeking silence.
She wants to feel, even if just for a moment, as if the crushing weight of the world is held at bay by the complex geometry of the dance.
But instead of finding inner peace, she accidentally taps into a live wire and triggers a massive magical anomaly.
She describes the physical sensation as being struck by a bolt of lightning. She completely loses her grip on time.
1 second, she is sitting quietly in the dusty library, and the very next instant, her eyes snap open, and she is lying outside on the freezing, hard cobblestones of the rookery courtyard, staring up at the sky.
Natius is kneeling over her, trembling, whispering a frantic prayer of protection in the old Anmic language.
Natius's reaction is deeply telling. He is a warrior, but in this moment, he is utterly terrified.
When Oliza, confused and disoriented, confesses that she was merely trying to visualize the Sacriashi after her bizarre encounter with Heir, Natius explains the true, lethal danger of what she just brushed up against.
He warns her that falcons have been known to go completely irreparably mad, struggling to fight fate, obsessively trying to manipulate or bring about events they would never have even known about if they hadn't seen them in the visions.
Wait, I have to pause here, because the mechanics of this situation completely break causality.
Right, let's track the sequence.
If Heir's maddening vision of the future is the only reason she went to the library to deliver the cryptic warning, and that specific warning is what planted the idea of the Sacriashi into Oliza's exhausted brain, prompting her to use it as a meditation exercise.
Did Heir's desperate attempt to stop the magical disaster actually cause the disaster to happen?
Exactly. It's the ultimate, tragic, self-fulfilling prophecy.
It is a textbook temporal paradox. By choosing to act on the knowledge of the future, you inevitably, unavoidably participate in its creation.
The magic operates like a virus of the mind.
Natius theorizes that because Heir was already half caught in the grip of a Sacriashi vision, Oliza's physical proximity, combined with her mental mimicking of the dance's complex steps, triggered a powerful magical resonance.
It literally pulled Oliza out of the present and into the temporal distortion. The Anmic magic is highly volatile, intensely infectious, and deeply unforgiving of those who treat it lightly.
It's absolutely terrifying, and the incident leaves Oliza even more vulnerable and disoriented than before.
She feels a nagging, terrifying sensation that there is something crucial she is missing from the time she lost, but her memory remains agonizingly hazy.
So let's take stock. In the span of just a few hours, she has survived a massive political crisis with the Lions, a violent cultural riot, the discovery of a targeted hate crime against her best friend, and a reality-bending magical anomaly.
But the universe isn't done wringing her out yet.
Far from it, because the magic anomaly is ultimately just a distraction. She still has to return to the grim, immediate human reality of Urban's brutalized body.
She journeys down to the serpiente nest in the southern hills to deliver him back to the care of his people.
And this final journey brings us to the last and perhaps most heartbreaking section of our deep dive.
The ultimate isolation of the crown.
Oliza manages the immediate crisis beautifully. She navigates the furious, suspicious questions of the gathered dancers.
Together with Salem, she manages to calm the nest down, desperately begging for quiet so the heavily medicated Urban can rest.
Exhausted beyond measure, Oliza lies down next to him on a makeshift pallet of blankets, seeking the familiar, unconditional comfort of her oldest friend.
Because we have to remember how Oliza views Urban. She explicitly stated earlier that Urban was her safe space.
The nest was the one place she could hide from the rigid, judgmental cruelty of the royal court. He was her childhood friend, her confidant, her escape from politics.
But the events of the evening have permanently, irrevocably shifted their dynamic. Urban eventually wakes up from his painkiller-induced sleep.
As they are lying there in the dim light, he reaches out and gently runs a hand through her feathers, a gesture of pure childhood familiarity and comfort.
But then, the text notes a devastating shift. His gaze changes. It becomes, as Oliza describes it, decidedly unchildlike.
He reaches out, turns her head toward him, and steals a very adult, intensely romantic kiss.
And Eliza's reaction is instantaneous. She pulls away. She tells him to stop.
Urban, trying to mask the rejection, asks if she's just worried about hurting his broken body. She shakes her head.
He accepts the rejection with a bitter sort of grace, saying, "Can't blame me for asking." But the profound damage to their relationship is done.
The text notes that the night air in the nest suddenly feels overwhelmingly colder to Oliza.
We have to analyze why this specific interaction destroys her final safe space. Because Urban is no longer just a victimized friend seeking comfort. By initiating that romantic kiss, he is officially asserting his claim as a royal suitor.
And that single action completely recontextualizes the violence of the evening. His beating in the Northern Hills is no longer just a generic, tragic hate crime against a serpent.
It is now framed as a targeted political assassination attempt on a potential king of Wyvern's court.
Exactly. By forcing the romantic issue at that exact moment, Urban forces Oliza to stop looking at him as a friend and forces her to view him entirely through the cold, calculating lens of the crown.
She can't just be a grieving girl comforting her injured buddy anymore. She has to be the Wyvern.
She has to immediately begin evaluating the massive political ramifications of her associations. If she accepts his advances, she validates the avian's worst fears and invites further bloodshed.
The psychological isolation she experiences in this moment is absolute. She realizes there is no escape from her burden.
She quietly leaves the nest, walking out into the pre-dawn rain. She walks entirely alone through the empty market center, and she eventually comes to a halt in the central plaza.
The imagery of this final scene is so cinematic and deeply evocative.
She stands before the massive white marble statue of the Wyvern, the idealized symbol of pride, of hope, of the supposedly perfect union between the avian and serpiente nations.
The stone statue is poised beautifully, looking proudly and fearlessly up to the sky, and Oliza, standing alone in the freezing rain, absolutely drenched in the political failures, the magical terrors, and the personal heartbreaks of the night, allows her biology to shift into her fifth form.
Her half-form.
The monster.
Yes, the horrific synthesis. The sunset wings erupt, the black scales ripple across her skin, her eyes turn a piercing garnet, and the venom fills her teeth.
She looks at her reflection and acknowledges the tragic reality. This is my half-form, my monster, a form no one I knew could see without flinching.
She stares up at the pristine stone wyvern, and she actively envies it. She envies the stone because the stone is inanimate. It doesn't have to feel the impossible, agonizing contradictions it represents to the people who built it.
Heavy is the head that wears two crowns. The physical manifestation of her monster form in the rain represents her total, inescapable psychological isolation. She cannot be just a girl. She must be the Wyvern.
But the brutal reality of being the Wyvern is that, to everyone she loves and tries to protect, she is fundamentally a monster.
We have traced an incredibly dense, fascinating journey today. We've navigated the impossible biological demands of physically bridging two prejudiced cultures.
We've examined the terrifying fragility of diplomatic treaties built on intergenerational trauma.
We've looked at the maddening, reality-breaking dangers of onmic precognition, and we've ended on the lonely, chilling reality of absolute, unshared power.
It is a phenomenal, deeply layered text. We've unpacked so much regarding the sociology and politics of this world, but I want to pose one final thought for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
It's a question about the intersection of duty and desire.
It's the core philosophical dilemma of hereditary leadership.
Throughout the entirety of the text, Oliza expresses this incredibly strong, almost desperate desire to choose her mate based purely on the pull of her heart.
She explicitly, repeatedly rejects the arranged marriage traditions of the conservative avians. She desperately wants an organic, romantic, choice-driven love.
But consider the historical reality of her own existence. Her parents, Zane and Danica, engaged in a purely political, deeply cynical, mad plan of an arranged marriage, specifically to force a peace.
They didn't do it because they were soulmates. They did it to forcefully end a 2,000-year war. And despite the friction, it worked. The killing stopped.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of sacrifice. If we connect Oliza's desires to the larger geopolitical picture, is her yearning for a simple romance actually a deeply selfish luxury?
Can a living, breathing bridge between two warring nations truly afford to follow her heart? Or is it her tragic, unavoidable duty to use her own marriage as just another political tool to reinforce the fragile treaty her parents built with their blood?
Think about the sheer weight of that for a second. If you are the literal genetic embodiment of a fragile peace treaty, if your failure means the world burns and thousands die, Can you really afford to fall in love?
It's a heavy thought to end on, but a necessary one.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly dense deep dive into the politics and pain of Wyvern's court. Keep questioning the narratives, keep exploring the layers, and we will catch you next time.